in some instances, the 2020-2021 school year, okay? So the TABOR report data is data that is compiled by TEA for every district and campus using PEANS data and student assessment data. It is published as a PDF, which you all have in your packets. It includes a wide range of information on the performance of students in each district and campus in the state. Performance is shown disaggregated by student groups, including ethnicity and socioeconomic status. And the TABOR report does provide extensive information on school and district staff programs and student demographics. On section 1 of the actual TABOR report, which you have a copy of, the first page or the cover page is our 2022 accountability ratings. And if you are looking at the TABOR report, you will see the district name, Crystal City ISD. Our district number is 254901. We have an accountability rating of a B for the 2022 accountability school year. And we have a needs intervention flag in our 2022 special education program. For the record, there are no distinctions at the district level, okay?
You said a 3 in special ed?
No, ma'am, I said it needs intervention.
Oh, yeah.
A needs intervention. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started with section 1 of the TABOR report. Board members, hopefully you will all have had the benefit of going over the data. This is, again, data it's reported during the 22-23 school year, and it is data collected during the 21-22 school year. The first several pages of section 1, I am looking at page 3 of your report, going all the way to page 11 of the TABOR report. This is inclusive of grades 3 through 8 and all EOC student performance data for the 21-22 school years. The way the data is broken up, it is broken up depending on proficiency levels, whether our students met STAR performance at the approaches level, the meets level, or the master's level. Okay, again, this is for grades 3 to 8 and all of the EOCs, okay? In looking at these several pages of data, I can ascertain on behalf of the district that for the 21-22 school year, in comparison to the 2020 school year, which are the 2 years of data that are being compared in this report, the district has exceeded performance in 2022 as being compared to 2020 and 2021. Again, hopefully you all have had the benefit of looking at every single grade level, every single subject area tested, and the performance of every ethnic group that is being evaluated as part of our super group. For us, that's our Hispanic group, that is our special ed current group, that is our economically disadvantaged group. These are the 3 major groups that we consider when we are looking at progress in our data. Do you all have any questions, board members, in regards to grades 3 to 8 and EOC performance as it relates to proficiency levels in approaches, meets, and masters? Okay. If you look at page 12, on page 12, what you will find is academic growth. This is our academic growth over 2 testing cycles. For us, the 2 testing cycles that are being considered for comparison is 2022 in comparison to 2019. If you recall, prior to COVID, 2019 was the last year, prior to 2022, that we received a rating. So those are the 2 years that are being compared in your TABOR report. Again, in looking at your grade levels and the tested areas, I can ascertain on behalf of the district that we saw marked improvement in regards to progress across the grade levels and across the subject areas. We do have some dips in some areas that we are already addressing. For example, if you look at grade 8 math and compare 2019 to 2022, We know that we saw significant dips in performance in terms of growth. This is a group that we are working with very closely as they are now in Algebra 1, okay? In regards to performance, moving on to well, let me backtrack. I want to go back to the academic growth analysis in progress. We do have, even though 8th grade math saw significant dips in performance, Flyer Junior High as a whole, as a collective, grades 6th, 7th, and 8th, did receive a distinction for academic growth. So even though there was a gap or a dip between performance in 2019 and 22, the campus overall did receive a TA distinction for academic growth in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th, okay? On page 13 and 14, what you see is very specific emergent bilingual or ESL bilingual information, okay? The way that this report is broken down is you have the 2 school years that for the purpose of this cohort is comparing year 2021 to year 2022. As you look past the district, and if you look at all those columns indicate the different instructional settings that we have for our emergent bilingual or ESL students. In looking at the district performance in comparison from 21 to 2022, I can ascertain on behalf of the district that we saw improvement in this specific group of students over time, okay? That includes different instructional settings with the exception of one dip that we saw in science in the approaches category. With the exception of that, we saw growth across the district. On page 15, what you have is STAR participation. These are the number of students or the percent of students that the CCISD tests over time. So what you'll see is that on pages 15 through pages 17, all of this data is detailing for you, the community, the number or percent of students that we are including in assessments. As you can tell, we do not practice excluding students from testing. We offer testing to all students regardless of the assessment that the students will be participating in. Okay, so all of this data up to page 17 looks very good. In terms of pages 18, 19, 20, and 21, this information is all referencing attendance, graduation, and dropout rate, okay? Now, this is data that's a little bit more dated. So attendance is always lagging for the state at least 1 year. So as you start looking at the comparison, your report begins comparing fiscal year 2019-2020 to 2020-21. So years 21-22 are not inclusive of this data, okay? If you look at the year of COVID, 2020 and 2021, our district attendance was at 89%. In comparison to the state, they were at 95%, and in comparison to Region 20, they were at 95%. So we had a significant gap in attendance in year 2020, 2021 in comparison to state and region. Then what you'll see is a breakdown of how many students we were able to bring back into the school system after COVID, how many students dropped out, and at what grade levels they dropped out. In looking at the annual dropout rate, grades 7 through 8, we do have a concern, and we already have an indicator, and we are working towards corrective action for the annual dropout rate, grades 7 through 8, for the school year 2020-21. Again, this data is dated. We do have the district in grades 7 through 8 outperforming or having a greater number of dropouts in that specific grade level than the state and the region. In looking at the 4-year longitudinal rate, this is for grades 9 through 12. We also have a comparison of class 2021. We have an annual dropout rate at the district level of 4.3. for grades 9 through 12. However, if you look at the state and the region, this is the year of COVID. We have fewer students having dropped out that fiscal year than the state and the region, which looks very good for us. One of the indicators that Mrs. Sendejo and I are already working on, even though, again, this data is dated, this is the year of COVID, is that during that year, special ed had an increase of an average of 9.8% dropout rate for that cohort, okay? Again, this data is dated because we are looking at 22 and 23 school year. Then you have the same group of, the same cohorts over time up until class of 2018. So the state does track our graduates over a very lengthy period of time. On page 21, we have our graduation profile. So this is looking at student graduates from the 2020-21 school year. During that year, we had a total of 111 graduates. Then you see the breakdown by ethnicity. You see that most of our graduates are Hispanic, 96% are Hispanic. Then you also have a detail of the graduation type. So what categories did our graduates receive their diplomas in? If you look at the number of students that graduated with an endorsement or with a distinguished plan, graduation plan, which is the last of the graduation type categories, we had 91% of our students that graduated with an endorsement in comparison to only 80% of the state, which speaks very highly of high school and the pathways that the counseling department and the administrative staff have created for high school students. So high school, great job when it comes to making sure that our students are in the right graduation type. In terms of the special programs, you also see a breakdown of the number and percent of students that are receiving special services from the different programs. Okay. On page 22 and 23, you have our students that are college and career ready. So one of the observations here is, if you look at the bottom of page 22 and the top of page 23, overall, we had the CCISD and overall, but obviously high school, because CCMR is a very exclusive to high school indicators. The CCISD exceeds the state and the region in every single category of this section of TAPER. So again, kudos to high school for a job well done there. Moving on to pages 24 and 25, this is now getting ready for post-secondary education. So one of the indicators that we know we have to work on, which are ongoing discussions with high school, is the number of students, and I know that we've had this discussion at the board table also, the number of students testing for ACT and SAT, okay? Mr. Alvarado and I and his counseling department will continue to have continued conversations about increasing the number of students that are taking the benefit of those sets of assessments. Moving on to page 27, now this is actual student information, okay? So in the school year 21-22, we had a total number of students at 1,779, and then you see the breakdown by grade level. You also see the breakdown by ethnicity and sex and then special programs. On page 28, one of the indicators that we are working very closely with Mrs. Garcia is our homeless section. We do have, in comparison to the state, we do have a population of 6.1% of our entire student body that is classified as homeless in comparison to the state, who is at a 1.1. So we have a huge discrepancy there that we need to continue addressing, which we are doing already. On page 29, you will see the retention rates on that first set of information charts. The concern that we have, and we will be working with Mrs. Bermea and with Ms. Lopez, is the retention rates at grades kinder and grade 1. Our retention rates are higher locally than the state. Okay. In terms of class size information, we're very comparable to the state, and in some cases we have fewer students per classroom than the state does. On page 30 is the staff information. We have a total of 306 staff members, and then you'll see the breakdown by staff. by librarians. You'll see the breakdown by ethnicity, by sex, by degree, and by years of experience. In terms of professional staff, we have, with the exception of campus administration at the school, at the campus level, almost all of our indicators, let me rephrase that. We have fewer staff per indicator than the state does, with the exception of campus leadership. All the other categories, we have fewer staff than the state does in comparison. On page 31, you have continued staff information. So, and this is again work that we are continuing to address through our consulting chief, financial officer, and at the board table, salaries. Salaries is an issue that it continues to be ongoing for the district. Mr. Cepeda and I are going to bring you a 3-year plan to look at mitigating some of the discrepancies between the state and the district. The disparity is significant, so it is something that we need to address. And then on page 32 of the student data part of TAPER, you have continued staff information. Again, this is the percent or number of teachers that we have per program. And we are, in terms of bilingual ESL education, we are significantly below, but that's because our student population in that group is considerably low. We also need to be looking at our compensatory education because we are less than 1% in comp ed. And so just to clarify, compensatory education is for all of the students that require accelerated instruction because they failed a state assessment in any grade level at any subject. So that is an area that, again, Mr. Cepeda and I are addressing. In terms of section 2 of the TAPER, section 2 of the TAPER is addressing our school finance, okay? And I want to make sure that the information that you have is for information from the 2019-2020 school year. This information is based on enrollment, okay? So for the fiscal year of 2021, again, the data is for 2019-2020. And I'm looking at the per student allocation. So I am looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th column, okay? So what is it that we need to know? We need to know that the total revenue per student locally is $14,677. Our total expenditures for students in CCISD is $13,849 for a discrepancy of $800. So the majority of the money that we are receiving from local, state, and federal grants is going exactly to student and student needs. That is very good. That is very good financial workings for that year. So all of this data is broken down into smaller pieces of information. So on page 2 of that report, if we need to break down the expenditures by function, then this report gives you very specifically that breakdown. So out of the $13,849 that we spent on students, this gives you a breakdown of per dollar how much went to which program, to which function. And then on page 3 of that same report, if you want the information by program intent, then you will see that same breakdown by program intent. Okay, again, this financial data was submitted to TEA in January of 2021. It is a replica of the expenditure audit for fiscal year 2019-2020, for which we received a superior rating. Okay, yes, ma'am.
The TAPER is on the school website?
It will be after they're here.
Okay.
On page 3, I went ahead and I added to the administrator address. You all have a letter from TA that stipulates that for the accreditation ratings will pick up in years 22-23. There was no accreditation rating for years 21-22. So what I have done is I have given you a copy of our most recent accreditation rating. So for the CCISD for 2019-2020, which was the last year that we were given a rating, we had a first rating of superior achievement. We had an accountability rating of a B, and we had an accreditation status of accredited. This year for 21-22, our first rating is also superior achievement. Our accountability rating is also a B. We are hoping once accreditation ratings are released that we will also be accredited. So we look good when it comes to accreditation. In section 5 of your packet, this is information that I will not be going over because these are the campus objectives that the board approved in the campus objective, goals and objectives out of the campus improvement plans that the board approved in October, okay? On section 5 of the TAPER report, you have all of our very inclusive student disciplinary action incident counts by reason code. So by law, we are required to report to TEA any violent or criminal incident that may have been reported on campuses. In looking at this report and looking at all the different incidents that we are responsible for reporting on, we did not have any Title V or felony offenses in the district, okay? And this information is extracted out of PINS data. In section 7 of your TAPER report is the most current Texas public or independent higher education information, and that is based on the 2018-2019 school year. For Zavala County, of course, Zavala County has La Pryor also to account for, but for the sake of the TAPER, we're only looking at Crystal City ISD. We had a total of 118 graduates. Of those 118, 12 attended a 4-year public university. 57 attended a 2-year public college. We had 1 student that was independent in college or university. We had 0 students that we were not able to track. And we had 48 students that were not found, okay, either because they've opted to go into the workforce or for other reasons. Next to those reporting categories, you will see their GPAs, the higher education GPAs for their first year in a public education. And so you see the GPAs are pretty sustainable, those look good. This next section is new to the table. Which is a very colorful section that you have. And Mr. Boria and I have kind of talked about this. I need you to recall, board, that this is the year that this board adopted new board goals. The board goals under House Bill 3 were supposed to be adopted in 2019. It should have been completed by 2022. We are on a delay, so all of our goals are on a delay. So our plan shows up to 2025. And so what this is exactly the same data that Mr. Moreno, our data fellow, presented to you, the progress that we are making towards the academic goals and where we plan to end the school year this year when our students test. And again, this is information that was presented to you in December, okay? And then the last section of the TAPER report is the glossary, okay, which includes all of the technical education language that we use when reporting. Mr. Bonilla, with that being said, that is the end of the TAPER report. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. At this time, I will go to item 5, public comment on TAPER. That includes board members and members of the public. Any questions, comments?
I have a comment. Ms. Briones.
Yes, ma'am.
Every year that I've been on the board, I think this packet says 10 years. We've always been staged in special ed. Those kids are not making it. We're throwing a lot of money at it. I don't understand the problem.
So what we have done is we are at a level 3, Ms. Sendejo, this year. And what we have done is we've conducted root cause analysis with the campus administrators to find out what is triggering, what the root causes are to the low performance, and we've identified 2 instructional settings that we are evaluating. So we are hoping, as evidenced by the TAPER report, even though our proficiency levels are at level 3, we are seeing overall across the district that our special ed students are growing. In terms of RDA, which is the Federal Accountability System, RDA does not take into account growth. RDA does not take into account the gap, the COVID gap. The state does. That's why the state has domain 2. So if Accountability 23 is going to work out the way the state is proposing, RDA will go into the state accountability, and those students, instead of just getting a pass-fail, which is what we're seeing with level 3s, will have the benefit of academic growth. If that happens, which we are hoping and praying that does happen, we will be able to show the district that our special ed students continue to close the learning gap, as evidenced by the taper. If you had a chance to look at all the special ed indicators, we have growth all the way across.
So we don't exit anybody from the program.
Exit decisions are made by ARDS, not by us, not by administrators. They're made as evidenced by the progress that the students are making towards their IEP and their annual goals.
I mean, the only time I've asked about anybody exiting the program, they've graduated. And the parents no longer want them to stay in. So, I mean, I have a problem with it because that's a lot of kids that teachers have to worry about.
Correct.
It's on the teachers and it's unfair to them.
Unfortunately.
It's unfair to the kids.
Well, administration does not supersede an ARD. An ARD is the only decision-making committee that can determine whether or not a student is eligible for exit or not, based on their performance. But it's certainly something that we will track.
And on page 28, we have 57.9% kids that are at risk. So that's multiple issues.
Yes, and so when you're looking at risk, there are a multitude of at-risk indicators. So we have to look at each indicator because some of them may not have, and they may not be student performance based. It could be other indicators. So it's not, these indicators are not just purely pass or fail an assessment. Passing or failing a STAR assessment is one indicator out of 13.
Any more comments or questions? At this time, I'll go to item 6. I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Member Guerrero. Is there a second?
Second.
Second made by Member Espinosa.
Thank you, Ms. Ren.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, all those